So we talked about the understructure of a dress. We made the chemise, the drawers, the corset cover, and then we explored making the actual structure for a dress, and that was the corset and the hoop skirt. And then on top of that, we talked about making a petticoat. But we're just getting into the really exciting part about replicating a costume, and that's the actual outer dress. So we're going to start on that journey series about the outer dress, which is entirely exciting, and I'm so happy to finally be here. But I wanted to explore some details about replicating a costume that you don't sometimes think about or you don't really hear a lot about. And that's the learning aspect of what you need to know to replicate a costume. Whether that be the fabric you choose to use, the design techniques, the construction techniques, all the different aspects that you really need to know before making the actual costume. So if you haven't caught on already, we are talking about my series about replicating Christine's Masquerade Dress from the Phantom of the Opera movie. So you might have also noticed this. That is the start of the skirt of the outer dress. And in all honesty, not a lot of work has gone into that yet. This bustle part here is actually just draped in place right now because I did not get around to completing the skirt. And that's why this video is not about the skirt construction process. And that'll be next week because it's not done. It's just fabric kind of draped in place right now, and some pleats pleated at the waist. So that's the reason why we're not doing that. I guess you could call this a staller video. But as I was thinking about it, I really did want to bring you guys along for how do you find the details of a costume. You're talking about a movie that there's so much that goes on behind the scenes that we will never see. You get some behind the scenes snippets from what they release to the public, and you'll sometimes get behind the scenes photos. And of course, you also get all the movie snapshots and the promo images. But as with all things, that presentation that they're presenting to you is very canned and formal. They want a certain image to be released, and it's going to show what they want to show. But as someone who's trying to replicate a costume or anything in a movie, you need to know that behind the scenes stuff that sometimes is just impossible to find, and it can be a really big challenge to find it. Because when you're replicating something, you don't need just the outer finished result look. You really need to know what goes on behind the scenes, because that process is how you create whatever you're trying to create. And that can be really hard because, as I said, they want to release what they want to release, and that's all you get. And so this video is kind of a little bit about navigating that structure, so to speak, of the film industry. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that we don't know about, and that can be a challenge. There's so many questions. So how do you find that out? Well, the truth is, informed guesses are really the only way to go about it. You will never really dead set know that you're doing it the right way. There's only a few instances that you actually know a detail about a dress. Now, of course, there's the obvious visual details that you know it's a big skirt, it has elliptical back, things like that. There are obvious details, which is part of the costume. But there's other details like fabric. Will you ever know if you're actually using the right fabric? Now, sometimes you do know that, such as when I made Belle's ball gown from the live action movie. I knew that the underskirts were made of silk organza and the outer skirt was made of satin face silk organza because the costume designer released that in her statement in an interview. So that was I knew what fabric I needed to use. So there's some aspect that you'll know that, but most of the time you don't. The only thing that you can do is look at something, the information, whether it be a picture, a quote, something, and you have to read that through your mind and come up with an informed guess as how to replicate it. So I wanted to kind of break down my process of finding details that help with the construction process. And so first of all, the most obvious ones are pictures. Pictures literally speak 1,000 words, especially in the terms of costuming and replicating a costume. So what happens if a costume has hardly any pictures on the internet, or really in the movie in general? Just as an example, this masquerade dress is shown in maybe a compilation of a minute of the movie. I haven't actually sat down and done that, but I watched the scene, and a lot of that masquerade song, you don't see Christine the whole time. You see other aspects, and so really if you compiled all those different shots together, it'd probably only be a minute, and you don't see a whole lot in that minute. And that's what's so crazy about costumes in movies, is so much time goes into it. It makes a breathtaking appearance, and then you get it for about a minute. So that is an especially hard challenge when you're replicating it, because you don't have a lot to go off of. So of course, the next best option for finding pictures and views of the dress, or whatever you're replicating, is promo photos. These can be invaluable, at least if they have them. Sometimes they don't promote a dress that's worn in the film. They usually only do the popular ones. And in this case, the Think of Me dress is more popular. You see more promo images of that. And the promo images you see of the masquerade dress are actually pretty low quality. Low quality as you can't zoom up and see much detail. There's one or two that you can actually zoom up on and see details. The rest are just like a pixelated mess. That kind of didn't work for this one either, and I have made plenty of costumes that didn't have those promo images either. So there's other areas that we're going to explore that you can find details about a dress from. Okay, so we've got those two options that are fairly obvious, find the movie scene, see what you can find through there, the promo images. The next best option is exhibition photos. So when they have the dress on display somewhere public and these lovely people take pictures of the dress on display and post them on the internet. That is literally the best way. Sometimes it even tops the previous two ways of finding pictures, because when something is on display, it's stationary. There's no movement of the display. You can clearly see what it's doing as it lays still, and they're often good quality pictures, which means you can zoom up and see all the details. Another aspect of on display photos is the fact that when someone's taking a picture, they're not trying to hide different aspects of the dress. They're not getting the perfect angle to show the right sheen and such. It's just raw. You see the dress as it is. Because, as I said, the movie and the promotion pictures, it's a facade. They are displaying what they want you to see, and they're going to release the photo that best displays what they want you to take in from viewing that movie or the picture. So on display pictures think of it as the raw version of the dress. And that's actually why sometimes a costume looks not as nice when it's on display as in a movie or the promotion. Sometimes I look at the Cinderella dress on display and I'm like, what? I don't really get that, because it doesn't look the same. And that's the reason. The picture, the movie, it's going to put the best foot forward on a dress. And really, when you're replicating something, you want that best foot forward look, but you also have to realize that there's a not as desirable look to that costume. And even though it's beautiful all around, there's still an aspect of it that it's not as optimal as it displays on the movie and promotion pictures. So really, on display pictures are so helpful because it gives you a full view of the actual costume, not just the part that they want you to see. So that is definitely a plus. Now, there are some costumes that never go into display, and then you don't have that rich source of raw pictures and information. So that is a whole nother challenge, which fortunately is not going to be in this video because we are kind of gearing towards the masquerade dress and studying that. And there are a lot of exhibition photos of this dress, which will make a little more sense in just a minute when I share something with you that I discovered recently, or learned recently. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But yes, exhibition photos are the best source of information, in my opinion. Well, maybe quotes from designers and the seamstresses who actually made the dress, that maybe would be a top or close same amount. Anyway, sometimes you can't find those quotes, and often when you do, they're very limited in what they share. And there's actually one quote that the designer for the Phantom of the Opera movie, Alexandra Byrne, mentions about this dress in particular. And here is what we have to go on. I wanted it to be light and buoyant, and it had to have movement. The end. That's all you got from the designer on this dress. So as you can see, sometimes there's just not information on it. And sometimes you hit the jackpot, like in Beauty and the Beast. She mentions several quotes about the dress because it's the main dress that were really helpful in when I replicated it. But in this case, light, buoyant, and it had to have movement. Not a lot of information there, but that's okay because we have a lot of exhibition photos, which we'll dive into in just a minute. And there's actually something else that I just discovered since I made my petticoats, and that question of, is the dark pink ruffle a dust ruffle? Just a ruffle that's decorative attached to the skirt, or a whole separate petticoat? And the funny thing is, when I was filming that video, I actually had a few minutes in the video talking about how that dark red ruffle, or dark pink ruffle, whichever way you want to look at it, could be a dust ruffle. And I had it all in there talking about it could be a dust ruffle, da-da-da-da-da. And then I decided to Google dust ruffles just to see if I was on the right train of thought. And apparently, dust ruffles were not often seen. They were mainly a hidden thing in costumes, at least from what I understood and took away from it. So that kind of made me think, oh, I don't think it's a dust ruffle. And also I saw a detail in one of the dresses on display where you see some white ruffly bit peeking out right where the train is. And that's what made me even more think that that was a dust ruffle, that white frilly part, and not the main dark pink ruffle that you see. And so that's kind of what made me think, oh, I don't think it's a dust ruffle. And so I took the whole thing out, that whole video section of me talking about dust ruffles. And I should have left it in because you guys were so great and you guys all mentioned a dust ruffle as an option for that dark red ruffle. But with that information of the dust ruffle, that was kind of eliminated. I was planning on just attaching a dark pink ruffle to the bottom edge of the skirt because the skirt is lined, but I hit the jackpot on some information that I am so excited to share. And this is specifically about the masquerade dress. You might not always get this lucky with finding something on Pinterest, but in this case, I was really happy. I clicked on some pictures of the dress on display, and it took me to a website where there were several other pictures of the dress on display, and then also a picture of a certain plaque where the dress was displayed. So let me read this to you. The two-piece gown, that's a good little point right there, starting right off the bat, was worn by Christine at a masquerade ball. A point there, they say a masquerade ball. If you know Phantom of the Opera, it's kind of the masquerade ball because it's such a pivotal point in the storyline, but they call it A. Anyway, the pale pink spangled silk skirt is overlaid with cream tulle, and the bustled back takes center stage with its cascading bustles and large pink flowers. The silk bodice is accented with spangled blonde lace and rosebuds at the neck and sleeves. Hiding under the billowing skirt is a bright candy pink silk petticoat, a bustle, a pad, and a back flounce petticoat. The dark red ruffle is a petticoat. And I later confirmed this in another little happened upon lucky jackpot of information that I'll talk about in a minute. But yes, it's a bright candy pink petticoat, not a ruffle and not a dust ruffle. So I am going to make another petticoat of silk with a dark pink ruffle at the bottom. So that was I wish I had found that earlier. A couple other points to be made is, first of all, spangled silk. Spangled means covered with spangles or other sparkly objects. Thanks, Google. So when they say the pale pink spangled silk skirt is overlaid, you'll see in these pictures that there are crystals placed on the skirt. Another thing with the silk bodice is accented with spangled blonde lace. Okay, so spangled, we got that figured out. There's gems placed on the bodice. And what does it mean when it's saying a blonde lace? Okay, so does it mean blonde as in the color blonde? Well, I decided to do some Googling, and thanks to Wikipedia, blonde lace refers to a continuous bobbin lace from France that is made of silk. The term blonde refers to the natural color of the silk thread. There's that blonde explanation. So apparently it's a silk bobbin lace that's along the neckline. Now, unfortunately, that would be very expensive, I'm sure, almost positive, and I already picked out lace when I was in LA for this bodice, so that won't really change anything that I do for this bodice, but I thought that was very interesting. And again, this is so valuable, and I just found it, which is so frustrating, but at the same time, at least I found it now. And then, of course, the hiding under the skirt, the petticoat, which answers that question, and then a bustle, a pad, and a back flounce petticoat. So that would kind of be, I used more of an elliptical hoop skirt versus just a bustle contraption that you would usually see in the Victorian era. The pad, I'm guessing, is referring to what pushes that bustle up, which I have. And then the back flounce petticoat, which I do have a petticoat with a nice full flounced back, kind of, I guess. Anyway, that was so helpful, and the petticoat alone, I was so thrilled to find that out. So again, sometimes you will find information in the randomest places, and it just takes time to dig through all that, to dig through Pinterest and all the links that are found there to find some information. So another jackpot of information that I just got was thanks to a comment on my Instagram post. I recently posted this picture, and a certain person commented. His name is Richard Cook, which apparently he is the costume designer assistant for the Phantom of the Opera movie. I was pretty shocked and kind of excited and totally random and crazy, but he commented on my post, and anyway, that was crazy. But I was not going to lose this opportunity. I wrote him, like probably anyone would, can you share any pictures you have of behind the scenes of making this dress? Because that would be so helpful. I mean, okay, I'm a little over dramatizing that, but I was pretty thrilled to have his attention somewhat. So let's see what comments and information he gave, which, by the way, was amazing. So his original comment: I remember this dress very well. I worked on the film as assistant designer and had a lot to do with this dress. Okay, so I did ask some questions, just like, do you have any behind the scenes photos? And he responded, we had to make 5 after the film was released for exhibitions. They made 5 extra dresses just for displays. That kind of information alone blew me away. I didn't realize that they would actually do that, simply make a dress and spend all that money and time just to have it on display. But that was crazy, and that would actually make sense if there's any inconsistencies between what you see on display and what you see in the movie and what you see in promos, often multiple dresses are made for the same scene. There are a lot of them. Example, the Cinderella dress. 9, or is it 8? I think it's 9 different versions of the Cinderella dress were made. Some of them were shorter so that when she's running, she cannot trip on her hems. Other are longer. Some had holes in it so she could pick up her skirts with handles in the hoop skirt, which, guys, I'm getting ahead of myself because we are going to start the Cinderella series. I'm making another ball gown and I'm taking you all along with me. That is coming this fall. Yeah, I've got to get to work on that also. So there's a lot of valuable information in knowing that there's multiple dresses made of the same dress. Because if you see an inconsistency between what you see on display and what you see in promo, it's probably because it's a different dress. Also, another thing to note, sometimes the on display dress will be much paler or just different colored than the actual movie. And that's because of color editing that goes on in movies. Because the Cinderella dress, it looks so pale on display, but then so vibrant blue in the movie. And so you have to also weigh that information of the real dress versus the dress that's been color edited. And so then you have to, of course, make the decision. Do you make it more like the display dress, the actual dress, or what the movie and promo images show? So that's a decision you kind of have to make. I usually go for the movie look because that's what everyone recognizes as the dress. Anyway, so they made five more dresses just for display, it blows me away. And that would actually almost make sense that you don't see the dark red ruffle on many of the exhibition photos. You don't see that aspect of it. So one, it could be just how the skirts are arranged on the dress form, and so you don't see it, or maybe they just didn't make it because they didn't think it's necessary. I don't know that information. I'm just throwing that out there. Another thing that I made a discovery on is this picture here, and if you look way down in the corner, you actually do see the dark pink ruffle right there. Yes, it's a very minuscule little detail, but I was really intrigued to see that little dark pink ruffle peeking out. So that proves that at least one of the dresses on display had the dark pink petticoat underneath. So moving on. He remembers that the crystals wore Swarovski, I think I'm saying that right, Swarovski, and he actually sent me a picture of the gems that they used. Yes, he actually did that, which is crazy. He said he had them on hand and he used them for another project. But another little detail that I picked up, it looks like the crystals are pink. They're not clear crystal. I did not expect that in the least. Super, super huge shout out to you, Richard Cook, for sharing that information. So again, back to what he says. The flowers were handmade in Paris, handmade flowers, which I will not be doing, made by Susan Hardy, who used to work at Cosprop. After he responded with those information bits, I was just so excited that he actually responded and took that time to share that information. And I decided to ask him some more specific questions, such as the petticoat. Is it really a petticoat? Something else I asked about was the bodice, because based on some pictures, it looks like the bodice is cut on a bias. Just with how the fabric is looking and wrinkling, it just looks like it's cut on a bias. And so I asked him that, is it cut on a bias? And he replied, the ruffles are on a separate petticoat for sure. They wouldn't have been attached to the dress. The petticoats may only have been pink halfway up. He then went on to describe that the one used in the actual movie might have been pink all the way up, just in case that the skirts flipped up or whatever. But he did mention that probably the pink would only go about halfway up. Definitely helped, and I'm so excited to have this information. This type of information you really don't get very often. Like hands-on experience information, you just don't have that. Okay, and then he says, I think the bodice was cut on a bias as well. So that kind of confirmed it for me. And then the pink fabric was from Versetta, which is apparently a company, and I looked them up and it seems like they're pretty high-end and they're more specialty, which would make sense. And the gloves were from Alberto Marola, I probably said that wrong, in Rome. So that is another company you can actually find online, and it looks like they make custom leather gloves. Those two informations they don't really change anything for me because I did get some vintage gloves that are perfect for this outfit, and then the fabric, of course, has already been cut and used. That amount of information, again, is not something you find very often, and so it kind of was a jackpot moment for this dress, and I'm so excited to share that information with you guys and whoever might be watching this planning to make this dress as well. I can tell you that the 3 or 4 most common places for you to find that information are the movie itself, which another thing to mention about watching the dress in a movie is because it's in motion. An in motion picture or video of the dress is so helpful because you can see how the fabric moves. With that view of the fabric, it's easier to see what type of fabric it can be. You know, is it a crisper look, so a taffeta, or if it is a slinky look, so something else. So you get the point. But that is movie area is definitely helpful, and if it's still in theater and you're trying to make it, which was my case for Beauty and the Beast, that can be a little bit of a challenge because you can't own the movie and look at the scenes. But so movie, and then promotional stills and photos, and then of course exhibition pictures are amazing, but take into account that sometimes it's a completely different dress than that was used in the movie. And then of course any information you can find from the costume designer themselves or apparently their assistants, because that is also very helpful because they were hands-on with the dress. So I hope you enjoyed this little random video about researching a costume and how to replicate it, and if you're on your own replicating journey, I hope that was helpful and maybe give you some inspiration for how to find the information that you need to perfectly replicate a dress. I throw perfectly in there because I'm a perfectionist and I like things to be perfect. So anyway, I find that information and just spending time on the internet, finding the right information to replicate a dress is really the most valuable thing you can do when replicating a costume. Thanks for watching this little staller video for this series of Christine's Masquerade Dress. And I will see you next week with the actual making of the dress, because as I mentioned, this dress is not much right now. It's just fabric sewn together, and it needs all the structure to keep it looking like this, not just plopped up. If you'd like to like the video and leave a comment, and then if you aren't already, you can hit that subscribe button because I post weekly. And a huge thank you to my patrons who literally make this journey possible. I would not be doing this if it wasn't for you, and you can find that information for that down below. And now go out into your own sewing area and learn, create, and inspire. On that note, I have some t-shirts and swag down below with that learn, create, inspire. And you can find that information down there if you're interested in that swag. With that, now go out into your own sewing area and learn, create, and inspire.